Okay, we are
Live?
yes, we are live at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton, and you're on mute.
Okay, I'll start off this Facilities Finance Committee meeting. Is anyone have any comment? Anthony, any public comment?
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Okay, then we'll move into presentations. Peter Simone, who you'll all remember, is doing our tree planting plan as an update for where we are. So if you can take it away, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time. As most of you, I think, know, the request for bids has been out on the street for about a week and a half now. We had a mandatory pre-bid meeting recently, and we had 4 companies show up. So we did a tour of all the facilities with them. We had questions due on the 6th from the bidders, and we responded to those questions. Nothing really of note today. All those responses went out, and the bids are going to be due on the 13th. And we worked with your attorney, she was fantastic, helping us to get the front end legal section together. She was very helpful. And so on the 13th, we will receive the bids. We will post them on the Penn bid site within about an hour of receiving them, so everybody knows what everyone bid. And we'll review those, and we'll make a recommendation to the school district later that afternoon, or at the latest Wednesday morning. Should be fairly straightforward. And if the school board feels comfortable with awarding the contract on the 15th, you could do so at your meeting on the 15th. If for some reason you can't do that, it could go to the next month. But ideally, if it can be done on the 15th, if everything's in order, and we all think everything's in order, that would give us another month and give the contractor a nice window to start the planting this fall. So that's sort of a summary of where we are. The total amount of money for construction is roughly $450,000. And that's going to buy us somewhere in the neighborhood of about 450 trees. We have a base bid set up and 3 alternates, so that we're sure to fall within our budget. And then if we have enough money in our budget, we will buy the alternates in order 1, 2, 3. So that's sort of a summary where we are. I think we had some good companies show up at the pre-proposal meeting, and we're expecting to get 4 competitive bids. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or respond to any questions that you might have.
Laura.
Yeah. Could you remind us, or someone remind us, how much of this is covered by the grant?
Yeah, 80%.
Okay.
80%. The 450 I mentioned is what's left for construction after our fee of $65,000 is taken out. So the total amount of money available is, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's in the neighborhood of $510,000. School district contributed 20% of that. This is federal money that passes through DCNR through their Tree Vitalized program.
Thank you.
Sure.
Seeing no other hands, thank you very much, Peter. And Maureen will be talking to us at the board meeting on next Thursday, and giving us a recommendation on behalf of Peter, assuming, as he said, that everything's in order and we can move ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Maureen too for all of her help. She's been instrumental helping us get this together relatively quickly after we contacted the attorney. The other thing I'll mention too, just real quickly, is that after we get the bids, there's still time to make adjustments. The contractor's going to stake the trees in the field. We're going to approve them. We can get the principals out there if we need to, things like that. So there's still going to be flexibility here and making sure everybody is copacetic with what's happening. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I really appreciate your making yourself available.
Absolutely.
It's over and out until we get started.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now it's time to turn it over to Dan. Oh, you have the Tom Hilton disease. You haven't turned on your mic.
There we go. Now I'm on.
Yeah.
Good evening, committee members. I'm going to share my screen. That's what I started to do first. So I'm going to go over a couple slides here for some updates first. First, we'll start with the high school gym floor. This was during the process here. And then this is where we're at now. So
Wow.
the top is the floor before we started. And on the bottom here is what we ended up with. Next, the facade work was mainly at Rupert, was the majority of the job. That has all been completed. This is the outside, north side of the building, and then the courtyard here. The crew there did a very, very great job, and I don't want to speak too soonly, but after the first big rain we had this week, we are drying the basement, so that we're very pleased to have that. And then the unit vents at the high school is also completed. Everything went very, very well and smooth with that. So we'll have good AC running in all those locations for the start of school. And also some other updates. The fire alarm systems at both the middle and high school have been completed. We passed our inspections with the fire marshal this week, so we're all set there. And the athletic field improvement study has continued with the ULA this month. They performed some underground utility locating as well as surveying the field locations. And regarding the middle school playground, at this point of the summer, it's likely that we will not have a playground until the spring or summer of 2025. The permit process was much lengthier than anticipated. In February, we reached out to the borough and found that the required permit was similar to a land development plan, which we did not expect. So next Tuesday, we will be meeting with the borough and their engineer firm to review the 10-page requirement letter and hopefully make some progress with waiver requests. And finally, as we had at the board workshop in July, we were provided a preview of a feasibility study process and snapshot of where our facilities are now. We do not have an update from EI included in tonight's meeting, but I'd like to remind and encourage the board members for your insight and suggestions. Please email myself, Mrs. Oakley, Mr. Rodriguez, or Bruce directly from EI with any input you have, and we'll refine our study. Any questions? That's all I have.
Okay, it doesn't appear there are any questions, so thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate your report.
Thank you.
And unless somebody else has a facilities matter, we'll move right into finance.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. As you can tell, August is kind of our ramp up time of year. So we do have a number of contracts that will be on for consideration. At this time, we have 5 special education contracts, 4 staffing for contracted services. And we have 1 Title I interagency agreement, and that's with the MCIU. Also this month, we have the Montgomery County Tax Collection Committee, and this committee is actually comprised of all of the entities in the county that impose earned income taxes, and we all must name a delegate and an alternate. So this resolution is just to simply update our assistant business manager, Kay Cisco. She'll be named as the alternate delegate for voting purposes. Also, we have our annual acknowledgement of our CMD drivers. And this was a takeaway from our last state audit that we had, when the suggestion was from the state that we must annually approve a list of names, even though they are not our employees. They still want us to acknowledge our drivers by name. So we are complying with that request. Annually, our school physician and dentist rates, we're approving them. We still utilize Dr. John Anderson, as well as community health and dental. And that will be on for approval as well. We do have a number of bid awards this month. We were able to get some solicit some bids for the cafeteria and foil, which we were hoping to get those back in June, and we didn't get any. So Kristen worked with some of the vendors that she used in the past and had them submit, the bid through the process, and we will award for our foil and paper disposable trays. We also have a bid award for social and emotional learning, music media specialist, and that's going to be awarded to Strive through the BSCA grant that we were awarded last year. In addition, we're going to add 2 middle school MTSS counselors, and that will be awarded through the Lincoln Center. And this was through Title I school improvement funds, just for the middle school. So those counselors will go to the middle school, and we will award that as well. I'm also hopeful that we will have some bids submitted next week, early next week. We would like to replace the 2 10-passenger vans for our high school. When we did our transition years back, we kept 2 vans that we used for purpose of all different things at the high school, primarily co-curriculars. But in addition to that, we do a lot of college visits and career and tech, competitions, band competitions, and we have a need for smaller vehicles to transport our students. This enables us to, have the staff member, typically coach or club ambassador, to, drive our kids when it's just a limited amount of students. And lastly, we will have, hopefully, as Peter mentioned tonight, the Landscape Architect Award. And just to note again, that award is due Tuesday, August 13th. So, pending Peter's recommendation and his analysis and our conversation at the district level, I will get that on the live board agenda as soon as possible, but it may not come till Wednesday morning. So just to keep you updated as the timing is of how that process is going to work out. And that concludes all of the approval items that I have. I don't have any other agenda items, but I'll pause for any questions or comments from chair committee members.
Well, I'm not seeing any hands. So do you have any information for us?
I don't have any information tonight. If you have information that you would like me to bring back to the committee or next week to the board, I'm happy to do so.
Okay. Well, then I will ask, once again, Anthony, is there any further public comment?
We are experiencing some technical difficulties. So I've been on the phone with Mr. Santiago. Thankfully, our meeting is still running. Everything is fine, but he is working on a technical problem on his side. So at this point, we may not actually. I can look right now. We do have one attendee who does want to say something. So give me 1 second. See if I can make this happen. Mr. Yashinsky, do you have rights to turn an attendee into a panelist?
It looks like I can allow her to talk.
Please do so. Mrs. Jackson, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mercedes Jackson, East High Street, Pottstown, PA. I just had a suggestion on the part. I think that's a great idea to address the bus drivers by name. It makes it very personable, just for people who may have memory loss and or plus bus drivers switch up often. Maybe they can wear a name tag or have some type of put like a magnetic placard on the bus, so we can do that properly. That's my suggestion on that. And then just a little plug that on September 7th, FAC is going to be having a game night at the Pottstown High School from 5:30 to 7:30, just to get the community, the parents, the caregivers, and children in the mood to be prepared for a successful school year. So we can do that together and support one another. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you. And so that will now conclude our meeting, which was under 20 minutes, Mrs. Johnson. Let's see if you can top that.
I don't know that I'm feeling that competitive tonight. I've got other priorities. Okay, so for the Public Relations and Community Engagement Committee, do we have any public commenters for that? I'm assuming probably not.
Not at this time.
Okay. So I think the first thing we had on our agenda, which is not actually pulled up in front of me right now, but I believe I had a few items that Mr. Rodriguez was going to speak to. However, I'm going to switch it up a little because Maureen is still on, and I kind of wanted to cover this next thing with her. So as you all know, we recently finally had a state budget passed, which was awesome for Pottstown. It included the money that we had budgeted for and then some more. And I thought it would be good to kind of look back and recap what happened from an advocacy perspective, from a state legislative perspective. So I put together a little slideshow. Let me just do that.
And I wasn't ready to be to have the agenda displayed quite that quickly. So it when I realized we were concluding, but I do have it ready now.
Okay, and it's super. Our committee's agenda is fairly simple. So can everyone see the slides? 2024, 2025 state budget. Okay. I'm still getting used to my second screen here. Sometimes it does not behave like I would think it would. Okay, so I'm going to go through this. I certainly, if anybody has questions as we go through, you can raise your hand or jump in if you need to. Sometimes I know that it can be hard to raise the hand in time when you want to say something, but if there's committee members who want to interject, please feel free. Ms. Oakley and Mr. Rodriguez also, please feel free to jump in if you've got thoughts as we go. It's not a super technical slideshow because it is not really about our budget. It's not, that would belong in the previous committee, but because we have focused on advocacy, over the years, and because this is going to be really high impact, I hope, I would like to go through. So the budget passed July 11th. Statewide, it was a 1.1, or sometimes I'm seeing 1.2 or $1.3 billion increase. It kind of depends on what you count in that. A very high degree of that money was driven to low income or overtax burdened schools, or schools who just had low student spending in general. Just some highlights there. There was an increase in basic education funding to all schools. That's the money that is, here's this pot of money, we're going to run it through the formula. Every school is going to get what the formula says is their appropriate share. There was 100 million to help districts cover cyber charter costs, particularly for some of the overpayments for special ed. And there was also a small change to the cyber tuition formula. Maureen, would you be up for speaking to that? Or I feel like that's an area where you could probably explain it better than I could.
Sure. So historically, the way that the funding is derived through the formula to the charter schools is a pretty standard, it takes majority of our costs, what we spend, and divides it by our ADM. And then that's your regular ed cost, and that's the tuition that's set for Pottstown kids if they are to attend a charter school. On the special ed side, they take the special ed expenditures, and previously they would just take that total pot of money and times it by 16%, because 16% was back in 2012 or so, a number of years ago, was the average across the state. It was the average number of identified special education students in the state of Pennsylvania. So they thought 16% was a great multiplier. We'll just use that in the formula, and that additional special ed amount gets added to the regular ed amount, and then you pay the higher of the cost for any special education students who attend a charter school. And in our case, that really burned us year over year, because our trend of total identified special education students ranged from 22 to even, I think, almost as close as 25%. So when you use that lower multiplier, you're funneling more money through the special ed side of the charter school formula. The last time I looked, it was $250,000 a year, just by simply changing that formula to represent, just say, in 2023, Pottstown identified, call it 800 special education students, which is really close to our actual numbers. We were at 23, in excess of 23%, or 23%. So if you take our special education costs and divide it by 23%, it's a lot less than if you divide it by 16%. So there will be savings that we see just by using actual numbers. And that was one of the areas that I know was, advocated for, and it was advocated for heavily from business managers and all of the state entities, saying, like, the state, you have these numbers, they're already there. We do special ed reports every single year. Just please use our actuals. Don't in some case use actuals, and then some case just use a round number, because it really ends up, taking a toll on districts like us. So that was definitely a positive and a move in the right direction. Hopefully we'll get some more charter reform here. I know it's still in the works, and we definitely need, push for that, but this is a first step we've seen in a long time. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I've heard, it feels like the vast majority of school districts have special ed numbers that are well above 16%. So across the board, this felt like a win, and it felt like the lowest hanging fruit in terms of special ed, or not special ed, in terms of charter reform, because who can argue with using the actual numbers? I mean, it's just, of course we should use the actual numbers. So I was glad they got that through. Other money that came through in the budget, a lot of money for adequacy, which adequacy is when, is the way they're framing it for, like, these school districts aren't able to have enough to spend on students. They don't have enough for student need. The bulk of the money that the Basic Education Commission is saying should be spent to help implement fair funding is spent on districts that are not having adequate student spending compared to their student need. So it's like 80% of the money that they're recommending should go through not through the formula, but should be designated for the districts that do not have adequate spending, adequate student resources. The other part, the other like 20% of the fair funding, the extra amount for fair funding, is tax equity. And they kind of split it into two, and I'm not entirely sure why, but it's politics is why. But there's hold harmless relief and tax equity, which largely are both getting to the issue of there are some districts that are considerably overtaxed due to the state not paying their share. And we want to try to give them some relief, whether it means that they can actually lower taxes or whether it means they just have to, they can stop raising them for a while. This money is put there in order to do that. What else do we have here? There was also money for facilities. There's also a special education funding increase. I think that was generally on par with what we would normally get for an increase. That wasn't anything exceptional, especially considering special education costs continue to just go up as a, you know, as a mandated cost, right? I assume that's accurate, Ms. Oakley, to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there was money for school safety and mental health funding, and I'm sure that there were other things as well, but I was just trying to give some highlights there. So that was what was in this budget that passed 11 days late back in July. And I'll also just say, I had just left on vacation when that budget came through, and we had a whole nightmare of a flight, and we got into Seattle, and I like went to bed at like 6 a.m. Pennsylvania time, and I woke up and it was the news, and it was like the best start to vacation ever to see that finally we got it and I didn't have to think about it. Okay, I wanted to mention what a big role advocacy and political pressure played in this. So, and it came from a variety of directions, I guess I'll get to that. There's a couple of things to say about that. One of the things is that there's a ton of statewide organizations, lots of local advocacy organizations and groups of people at the county level, at the state level, at local levels. There was a unique amount of synergy this year because there was just a new level of agreement, partly because the court case had happened, and partly because of the Basic Education Funding Commission. There was just a lot of agreement about what the overall strategy should be. And it wasn't that every group did the same thing, or you know, some people might be a little bit more abrasive and some people might be able to have softer advocacy, but there was like a general sense of here's the people we need to talk to, here's how we should approach it. And there was like a collective, we've all got our parts to play. And there was just a lot of rowing in the same direction. And I just was very encouraged by that. And I thought that it served us well. I know that the budget still was not everything everybody wanted it to be, because a lot of people would like to see a long-term plan. But I think there's broad agreement that we've made some serious progress. Another thing that factored in was the Commonwealth Court ruling that said that our current funding from the state was unconstitutional. And then to follow up on that, the Basic Education Funding Commission that kind of leaned into that and like addressed different elements of it. The threat to the legislature of getting taken back to court because they weren't actually addressing the ruling, that mattered. That sense of, okay, they've already ruled this way, and if we have to go back, if we get sued again, this time the judge might decide how we do this. We might not get to make so many decisions ourselves about how we do fair funding. They might tell us exactly how we're going to do fair funding, and we might not like it at all. So that played in. There was tons of outreach to, you know, all the various levels of government at play here, the representatives, the senators, and the administration. Again, that was part of that overall strategy where there was a lot of synergy. There was agreement on who to talk to, and people generally got covered. Nobody escaped feeling the pressure to deliver on this. And then there was lots of public pressure, rallies, op-eds, social media, types of outreach, texting and meetings and all of that sort of thing. Okay, I threw in a few photos there just because this is just stuff that came out of Pottstown in one form or another, and this isn't nearly everything. We have, in this picture, we have, let's see, PA Fair funding, we have the IU, we have, you'll notice in the top left-hand corner, that's from a presentation at the school board members, legislative and superintendent breakfast at the IU, and Mr. Rodriguez was giving a presentation about how the fair funding we've gotten so far has made an impact. Just trying to help the representatives who are in the room understand it's already making a difference. Taking these steps in the right direction is already having that impact. We have student representatives there, Teach Plus, I see represented, Power, Children First, all of these are different groups, and much of it playing out here at a local level, just in one way or another, like telling the Pottstown story, telling why this matters, and trying to contribute to that all around pressure. So that was just very encouraging. I figured a few pictures would be worthwhile. So locally, both of Pottstown's, our representative and our senator, Joe Cerisi and Senator Pennycook, voted for the budget. Total increase, and Ms. Oakley, correct me if these numbers are off, but I think that I found the right ones. Total increase was 4.2 million over last year. Some of that we already had, but we budgeted knowing we were getting more than last year. The increase that was more than planned was 1.3 million more than planned, which, and in these numbers are relief for cyber charter costs. Is there more to say on that, Ms. Oakley, that you would want to dive into at all?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we had some of the money in the budget, and what we got at the end of the day was 1.3 million more than what we had in our budget. So, it came through, like you already had alluded to, it came through all different buckets. It's in a tax equity bucket, it's in a ready to learn grant, it's in a hold harmless. So that all means different things moving forward in the future. Some of those buckets are more sustainable than others. So for planning purposes, it can kind of drive you nuts. You wish that they would just put it in the BEF and say you're never going to get less and this bucket's never going to go away. But as we know, we're dealing with politicians and everybody's got different ideas of how the money should go through. So it flowed through in some new areas, some new buckets that are new to us, and we're still waiting, certain guidance of what we're going to need to do on our end as far as compliance and how to spend it and how to report those funds. But very positive, 1.3 million more than we had planned. Again, just waiting on some of the rules for some of that spend and how we have to plan it. So that
Right.
does come with it, but yes, very positive.
And I did notice that some of that adequacy and tax equity money came through in Ready to Learn, which I know there were some people who were asking, what does this mean for the future? Is this money we can always count on now? And the answer is not entirely sure. I would not anticipate, based on the way they're talking about it, like it's just going to go away overnight. But what they did was they firmed up the base amount of funding, basically the new hold harmless, at last year's basic education funding. And so there's some stability in the mix, but there's also multiple asterisks. So
if you remember last year when the budget was finally passed, there was some new money in there. Like for instance, I'll say Act 34, and that was a facilities bucket. So just because the budget passed, it didn't mean that money became available to us, which was, it's just one of the hurdles that we go through because it's a new avenue and a new way that they put a new act in there. So they wrote it in, this is how the money can be used, but then they didn't actually pass school code to disperse the funds out. So they couldn't give us guidance on how to apply for those funds. So sometimes it takes some time. So again, I will note, while very positive to have the extra money, sometimes the back end work's not done yet. So that money's it's not coming to us yet. It's not available. Sometimes we have to put in applications for it and according to the uses that were allowable. So some of it takes some time, but again, I think we're in the right direction. And hopeful that they'll pass some of the back end codes that we need to get that money coming through to Pottstown as soon as possible.
Good deal. Okay. As I mentioned, the bulk of the increase was for adequacy. In other words, student need, whatever that looks like. And I shouldn't just say whatever that looks like. If they give us more parameters around exactly what that has to look like, then we have to comply with it. And tax equity / hold harmless relief supplements. So for Pottstown, our tax equity portion, if I remember right, is actually bigger, or at least that and with the hold harmless relief, kind of the same concept, are the biggest portion. Just because it's recognized that Pottstown has had such a excessively high tax burden. So, oh yeah, and it's right there in front of me. So yes, those two together are by far the biggest amount. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on this too. We've been talking for a lot of years now about where the funding goes if we get it. I mean, I think it was at least 4 years ago that we started talking about the 4 buckets. And if we get fair funding, here's what we're going to do with it. And we've been following through on it, and we've been talking about it. And Mr. Rodriguez, if you don't mind jumping in and just any thoughts you have on that, certainly to recap some of the ways we've already, implemented the 4 buckets, but also if you have any thoughts going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, because that's the number one question I get. Hey, what are you talking about? So, personnel, we've quite frankly increased our personnel because we needed to. We were running on a skeleton crew for a long time. So we've been doing that slowly over time, but because the one thing I think that the board knows, that the board cares about and knows that I follow through on with Maureen's help, is we want to spend money thoughtfully rather than quickly. And I know sometimes that's, people have their big ticket item that they care about, and they're like, all right, now you got something and we want it now. But we try to be very diligent with regard to how we spend taxpayer money so that we're not losing it or spending it frivolously. And if any of you have been in the room when Mr. Hilton has given us a bit of a history lesson of past administrations, nobody in this room, nobody in recent history, but past administrations that make recommendations that cost a lot of money and then don't turn out the way that we want. So we try very hard to avoid that. But back to what's going on here. Personnel, we've hired people at all levels, and that's one of the things we try to do, is distribute the wealth. Nobody wins everything they need or want all at once. And then programs, we talked a lot about some of the new programming that is specific to students and instruction. We've also added some of our athletic programming or co-curricular programming, etc. But for the most part, we're talking about curriculum and resources which help kids to learn to read and do math. Facilities, we just got done talking about that a little bit. I know, at the workshop we talked about it. We've been making improvements. Buildings get old. We use our buildings. We have thousands of kids in our facilities every single day. And I know that board members have seen some of my pictures that I have shared with you. But we've got wear and tear. And even though most folks walk into our buildings and they say, wow, this place looks pretty darn good. And we work hard at doing that. Eventually things do give way. So, we spend money in there. And then tax relief. As of right now, we have held the line when everyone around us and across the state and really across the nation has continued to raise prices raise taxes. And one thing that I'll just say here is many of our costs have gone up. I was in the business office today, and one number that was thrown out was certain costs are up by 33% from a couple of years ago. But we have not passed on those costs because we've been getting more money from the state, which allows us to absorb some of that without sharing that to the community. So between not raising taxes in an inflationary environment, and of course, last year, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but last year we gave the one-time checks, and this year we've got a wonderful new program which really demonstrates the heart of our belief in equity. So I've been able to talk about that with some community groups very proudly. I think it's really good work. And you know, from there we'll go. So I think that this demonstrates the major categories. Once we get into, hey, you know, are we going to buy new uniforms? Are we going to, you know, add a bus run? Are we going to, you know, get a new person for XYZ, etc. Like, well, all of that is, you know, we talk about it constantly. We bring it before the board. We think and we make sure that every dollar that we ask the board to spend or not spend is done with a purpose and with the most effect possible. And that's why sometimes people will get frustrated when they hear, oh, well, you guys got more money. That's true. I compliment Maureen. She did a great job of ballparking where we thought we would be. So many of the additions, and that's I think I'll end on this point. Many of the additions that we've been putting into the system, and every parent that I talk to says, wow, stuff is getting better. Wow, I really like this. Things are looking good. My kid's having, you know, a much better experience than maybe my older kid did. You know, really like this, the material and the fact that we've got, you know, more teachers and teacher assistants, etc. Well, we've been baking that into the cake, so to speak, over the past couple of years. So COVID is gone, but we still have the house model. And we have Montco 360 at the middle school, and we have, you know, new programs and expanded programs at every single level. So I hope that covered it.
That covered it. And another thing we still have are the extra counselors.
Yes.
So I think like that's some of that money that we planned on for this year from the state, knowing we're going to get an increase, was just to take those pilots from COVID that we thoughtfully used one-time money for, saying, if this works, we're going to find a way to keep it going. And because they worked, we found the money to keep it going, largely thanks to state funds. So, and I really appreciate the mindset of thoughtful rather than quick, because, you know, if we're getting, depending on what number one you want to use, if it's, you know, 4.2 million over last year, or if it's 1.3 million more than we budgeted for, whatever you want to look at, I alone could find 10 ways to use that money that I would like to see that money go for. Like, I have no shortage of ideas for, I'd love if we could do this, and I'd love if we could do this. And I don't want to fall into the trap of, okay, we got to hit everybody's wish list and then we're in actual trouble, which I really would not want us to be in. But I think that taking thoughtful steps is, you know, what we want to do. And to that point, thoughtful steps that are on mission. And so I, you know, prepare each student by name for success at every level. It's that idea of it should contribute to that. It should contribute to that mission. And I think that that's important with each, especially new expenses that we add on, to be thoughtful about how and if it's meeting a need that will contribute to that mission. And also understanding that those students live in the context of a community that has been highly impacted by our taxes. Their families have been highly impacted by the high taxes. I did want to highlight 5 years without tax increases and 2 years of that with tax relief. I was just in, since I'm the treasurer, I come in and deal with the bills every month and sign, you know, work on my carpal tunnel syndrome once a month. And I was going through signing these bills, and there were at least 25 there that were us writing checks to people who qualified for the property tax and rent rebate, which made that job a whole lot more fun real quick, I'll tell you, because it's exciting to see that money getting to the folks who have fixed incomes in the vast majority of cases and a higher level of need. So that was exciting. Okay. What's next? Advocacy wise is mainly what I mean by what's next. So there will continue to be pressure for a plan a long-term implementation. To the degree that there was a disappointment in this budget, it's that they did not adopt a plan going forward. It was just a single budget that essentially implemented most of what a year one in a plan would be, but there was no commitment to the future. There was no setting the default to actually fully fund schools. So I don't think there's any advocate in the state who's, advocating for fair funding, who does not want to see something that's more consistent, that the state is really saying, yes, we actually need to do the whole job. We will commit to doing the whole job. So that's going to continue to be a point of advocacy going forward. Next thing is knowing that that will continue to be an point of advocacy going forward. We're still going to have year-to-year budgets. I don't see any future in which we don't have to do some advocacy each year, advocating for a good budget, advocating for a good school code around that, fighting off bad ideas and advocating for good ones. So that will continue, and that progress will generally continue to build on itself, just like the money that we got 3 years ago has now been baked into the base and has continued to help us over the years. We want to continue to just build that in. And if we're not getting a multi-year plan, we're still building progress over progress year over year. And I think it's just really important for us to realize as a board, as a district, that as we are making these intentional, thoughtful decisions about how we use the money, we will need to continue to show it's working. Really working. And that's where, the data that shows that our graduation rate is improving, or attendance, or grades in general, or morale, or whatever it is. It's that discipline, not just year over year, but day over day, to just be showing that this is doing the job, and stay on mission. And that's it. So I'll just stop my share, but are there thoughts? Are there questions? Just observations from the overall budget. Okay.
Laura, the only thing I would,
go ahead.
I would add is new money, super positive, came with some new strings that were, kind of had some guidelines on. But our vision, the board's vision, is already aligned to some of those strengths. So everything that we're focused on here is already in line. So we're already looking at the tax relief and, the program that we put in place this year with the rebates, right? So we're doing the things. So it's great for us because we don't have to, we're not starting from scratch to come up with, okay, now we need to come up with new programmatic things. We've did that through COVID. We've added in the mental health piece. That's where our programs are already focused. So the work of the board is, our vision's already in the right direction. So I just wanted to add that I think that's really positive because it makes my job a lot easier when, we get new money and we get new rules, but your vision's already aligned to what it is that we need to do with that. So thank you as a board to, have that shared vision.
That's encouraging to hear, because whenever there's new strings, it is a little bit, especially being a little more removed from it and not knowing what those strings are, how much work they entail. It's nice to hear that it's already kind of syncing up with where we are. Ms. Spence, I see your hand is up. Do you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. What are the new strings?
So the way that the funding came through was increase to the basic ed subsidy. So that funding can be spent on general education. What we had in for our budget for basic ed subsidy, we were actually not fully funded with the governor's budget. What they did was take some of those increases and they put them into new buckets, which came through a Ready to Learn grant, which is an application process that we have to put in and say that we're going to spend the money according to the grant. So within the Ready to Learn grant, they broke it out into a few different pieces. So one of those pieces was the tax equity piece, and that was targeted to districts who already imposed higher taxes, have a high tax burden on their constituents. So one of the areas that they've would like you to see is some kind of relief. And that's where with our budget 24-25, we did the piggyback off the PA property tax relief program. So we can build off of that even more, but we are addressing that tax equity. We are addressing low income renters and homeowners, and we are rebating based on the application process that the state uses. So by doing that, I mean, we were ahead of the game. We passed our budget first. We passed our tax relief program first before the state. So that's where making that, that one string of this funding coming through Ready to Learn for tax equity, we've already started that thought process. We have a program in place. We're already doing it. Another area was the advocacy, not the advocacy. I'm sorry, I'm going to lose my train of thought. Yeah, yes. So in that bucket, like I said, some of these rules and regulations aren't fully out yet, but what they want us to do is spend our money on programs. So there's a whole list of different kind of student programs that we can address, but it is targeted, like it's not targeted for HVAC upgrades, right? Like we have to put that money into our students. We have to put it through curriculum or through personnel support. Some of the other areas that we get funding through is mental health support. So again, like we can't use that to, go buy new buses. That money has to be used towards mental health resources and student supports, direct student impact. So those are the kinds of strings that come through with some of this money, and with them being new buckets at the state level, they present the rules to us, and then they need to follow through and pass the school code, which then allows, the actual money to flow. I'm sorry if I didn't get all of your question, but I think I got most of it.
Yeah, that's fine. Is there a document that I can read?
Oh, there's a lot of documents. Yes, I can, if you, as far as like some of the new funding and what
The
it's structured
strings.
for. Yeah,
new
sure,
strings.
absolutely. I can pass some of the stuff that I've gotten preliminarily that came through after they passed the state budget. And we can definitely share that out to the board for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So yeah, thanks everybody for indulging that. I just thought it'd be really good to do a recap. Next on the agenda is the Justice Center. Is that right? Okay, so Mr. Rodriguez, you can take it away. I think both of the next items are yours, so feel free to jump in. Yes, right. Oh, you're on mute.
I was like, no one's responding to me.
Yeah,
Everybody.
I was gonna say this is really quiet for a long time. Maybe I wasn't
Yeah.
clear.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh,
I
all
didn't
good.
realize I was on mute. So if you see the agenda right now, so Justice Center student art in terms of a community relations dynamic, I just felt like it would be good to share. I was invited by the Justice Center, and there's some folks who are doing some work as it relates to student art and student expression, but they are relating it to student voice and justice. So one of the things that we know is that both Norristown and Pottstown deal with poverty more than average. They also deal with justice issues. Sometimes that means being victimized more than average, or dealing with some level of arrest or something that needs to be dealt with in court. So what in the world does that have to do with the Pottstown School District? Well, I had the same question. So I was invited down, and this is a group that we've actually worked with. One of the first things that they said was, do you have any art that we could display? Because we want to make sure that the voice of both Pottstown and Norristown students are being heard, and they have an outlet and a place where lots of people will see and be able to celebrate. So we said yes last year, but they're expanding their efforts, or rather revealing the rest of their efforts in this Justice Center work. So the hope and the plan is, and I'll show you some pictures here, as the new courthouse is being developed in downtown Norristown, and it's actually connected. You can kind of see it here in the background. This will be the lobby of the new courthouse space, and back here, if you can see my cursor, is where it connects to the rest of the old courthouse. So they walked us through, and it's this building, this facility will not be done till 2027. But all the judges, all the lawyers, all the different departments that work in the Justice Center have said, we want to see student art, and we want to see student expression, and we want to celebrate that. So going through this is just fascinating. I was a part of a very small group that was invited to see the makeup and some of what goes into creating a building, a huge building, a building that will last for probably well over 100 years. Everything from sea level to artistic design and even security. So the hope is that our students, you can see that this is I think the 4th floor, and they didn't have the wall built, so you can kind of see it in there. But the hope is that our students will be showcased, and they already have plans and permission. Once the hallways are done and they start using things, our student artwork will be out there. But in order to connect with what's happening, they want to bring students in to see during the construction phase over the next couple years, so that artists can see and really connect, because there is, as I recently learned, there is a lot of art connected to construction. So it was really interesting to see the construction manager or superintendent, whatever his designation was, he was passionate about art, and he talked about the architectural design and all the different elements that go into the many decisions that they make up. And I took some pictures of it, but I won't take all the time to explain it. But and that's him right there. But he took time to help us understand how artists and students can be involved in not only the construction field, but all sorts of fields are related to art. So that's it. I just wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to know what's going on, behind the scenes, to help our students have lots of really good opportunity. And Mrs. Yoder, I spoke with her today. She's super excited about the program. It's not, it's not going to be an everyday type of thing, but it's going to be an avenue and an outlet that artists from every single level will be able to be involved in. So I'll pause there. I know you have me for one other agenda item. Any questions on that?
That's really cool. No questions, just
Okay,
very cool.
very good. Well, then I will jump into the next part. Committee members, you might remember that we talked about the website and updating it. So I have a very brief demonstration of some of the updates. Let's see if I can display correctly. Share. Everyone see website update summer 2024? Okay.
Yeah.
So in very short order, I will tell you that what you're about to see is not going to be wildly impressive, because it's much of the verbiage and many of the links, to make sure that the links are updated and the language is correct and we've got the right people. But we did go ahead and take several of our pages. We went, well, pretty much every single one. We might have missed one or two, but Mr. Santiago was hard at work for a good portion of the summer, simply taking, and this is a sampling, this is not the full measure, but taking everything, going through, making sure that the information is updated, giving it a little bit of an update and a fresh look, so that people are able to interact a little bit easier and identify. So this is a great example of human resources being very small versus having that larger sign. Much the same information, just placed a little bit differently. So we can continue to do this on multiple pages to make sure that it was easier to interact. That might be the only one where we did it different, but that was still a good example, and the information is more up to date. Our Peak page was not utilized or visited very much. So one of the things we did do is give our North End Early Learning Center, again, much the same information, even more information. But many of those requests from the staff from that building, because they would get those questions from our parents, and we know that our parents visit the website a lot. So as you can see, we've gone through and updated a lot. Now, in just as a reminder, and of course, we took a place that we're not really in competition with, but just as a reminder, yep, you can see from last year on the left, and then the very last thing that happened, graduation. But let's see if this works. We decided that, you know, what we had was useful. We just needed to update it. But many people said, you know, like, what are you talking about in terms of, you know, other designs that maybe we don't want to pay, you know, a lot of money for? It would be a huge upgrade, and we'd have to pay for the transfer as well. But I still wanted to demonstrate an example of what's possible and what's out there. And maybe when some of the prices come down, we'll think about it. So please, nobody go crazy. Can you still see the screen here?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll notice that, you know, it's a full screen graphic. These are our neighbors, so I don't feel bad about showing it because anybody can do this. But it's a full screen graphic, and it is, you know, without a doubt, a big commercial for the Hill School. But this type of programming on a website is much more complicated than what we have, and you can see a lot of it is done with a drone. So I'm not going to go on much from there, except to say that we understand what's out there and what's possible, but as of right now, what we have is very functional, and we're going to keep using it, and we'll keep our eye on the ball to do an upgrade at some point in the near future, but we're not worried about it right now, especially at the prices that are in the market at this point in time. Any questions on the updates?
Kurt, go ahead.
Not so much on the update, but since you're talking about, you know, the website, and how's Power School rolling out today? How's it been?
I was ready. I was guarded. I thought that I was going to get beat up. Not a single complaint, not to my office. So that's not to say that there weren't issues, but we've been very deliberate in trying to make sure that our schedules were clear. So, I mean, I'd love to hear, did Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Kancianik?
You see our faces. We're not hiding it. I couldn't log in on my phone.
Okay.
It was acting as if it was the middle of summer when it wasn't accessible, and I went through this little thing where I updated my password from the computer, and then after like an hour it let me in, and I saw other people commenting that they also weren't accessing it from their phone, but then they reset their password and it worked. And I mean, and I saw, you know, chatter around, the schedule doesn't make sense, and yada yada yada, different things that are specific issues and questions that will be brought up by individual people about specific problems. But overall, I mean, most people were talking like they could see the schedule, and the ones who couldn't, it seemed to be addressed when they updated their password. Does that ring true with you, Phoebe? Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say the similar. I had to log in on the computer to then be able to get on my phone. I didn't have to change my password, but it still made me do that. Also,
maybe it wouldn't have made me change my password, except I couldn't remember it.
Right. Also, I did hear only from 2 people that the middle school schedules were not available. Now that could be just their own child, you know, I don't know, but for the most part, everybody else's I heard was they could find it and everything. So
Okay, I'll check on that for sure. Yeah, there's no question that the beginning of the year we always have folks who say, you know, oh, this schedule is messed up or whatever, and then, you know, that we get into the weeds for usually about 3 weeks it takes before everything gets shaken out. Some of it is, you know, I don't want math first block. I'm tired first block. And other times it's you know, I wanted art, which is fine, except art, you know, goes up against some other elective that you wanted. So then it's a conversation that has to happen. And we're used to that. Thankfully, it's usually a, you know, a relatively small percentage compared to, you know, the 800 plus schedules, or I guess 900 plus schedules at the high school. But yeah, it's early. I mean, by next week, we'll really know. There's a few early adopters that want to know what their schedule is right away. But you know, people will be thinking about it by next week. So we'll see. But thus far, the changeover to Power School has been, I would call it painful, which is why we don't do it very often. But for the most part, we're beginning to see the versatility and the power. Just the beginning, but we're getting there, and we're opening up. I had some meetings this week where we're going to be opening up some things so the parents can see more stuff. And it's not that we were hiding it before; we just didn't know what we were doing. So hopefully the information. In fact, if you'd like, we have 10 minutes. Do you want me to? Can I show you one other thing? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Very
While
good.
you're looking at that, Maddie wants to know why she has intro to guitar. And she's already talking about how she has an open box somehow. She has an open box somehow. We'll see about that.
I get it. Tell her to talk to her counselor. I give her whatever she wanted, but tell her.
She's already emailing Ms. Legal. Yes.
Understood. This is the time of year I'm really glad I'm not a counselor. Okay, here we go. So this is going to be a very, very quick. I was going to, you know, maybe show this next month, but it actually came in my inbox. The information got to me today. So one of the questions that I asked is our safe arrival system, you know, and this is parent communications and community relations. So I wanted to know our safe arrival system. And just as a reminder, that's the system that works with Power School. So when your child is absent, you get a phone call that says, hey, Johnny is absent. Should he be? Do you want to report that? And so here's just some information. As you can see, 36% of our users are iOS, or what the rest of you know as Apple. And then you can see there's some other uses there, some call in, call out, Guardian, which is basically a website web link, and 19% Android. So that means that, you know, a wide variety of devices are being used. So I see this as positive. You can see here 6,485 absences were reported. Now, if you think, my goodness, does anybody go to school? Remember that number is basically if every single one of our kids was out only 2 days a year, and we're in, that would be about 99% of the time. So this is not a bad number. But you can see here, the obviously high school and middle school has the most number of student absences, as you can imagine, but many were reported, not all. So this demonstrates the first notification. So I think there's a lot of folks who get the phone call and then will utilize the system differently, not necessarily on the phone. That's fine, so long as they're responding. We don't care one way or the other, although we do think that blue 5% will begin to go up as people get used to the system.
Wait, can you say more about that one? 5% is explained during, meaning how people respond to the phone call, like that
Yeah,
they
it means they
select
do it.
two, or
Yeah,
okay.
it means they do
I
it
think-
right there on the phone.
Okay, and I think that might be worth not necessarily in-depth discussion now, but having had a lot of trouble when I get calls and not being able to give the correct response, or not having it like accept my response, I feel like there's still some like technical stuff to hash out there that might be valuable, because I feel like that might be part of the reason it's such a huge amount that remaining unexplained is
That might be the whole reason.
Yeah.
That might be the whole reason. I'll you know, not now, obviously,
Yep.
public
Yep,
meeting,
but
but I'll call, you know, maybe both of you and just figure out, what's going on. Yes.
What's the caller ID say?
I feel like it says Pottstown or safe arrival. I don't feel like the caller ID seems sketchy. I pick it up. I just,
Right.
it won't, it doesn't have the correct option for me to select normally, or it acts like I'm not selecting it. And I mean, I think I thought that was being worked out, but maybe it never really did. And I didn't follow up with someone every time it happened. I kind of just assumed it was getting worked out, but we can follow up.
And would that include people that like it left a voicemail? Do we consider that as not a reply?
I'm not sure about that.
Meaning if I didn't pick up because for whatever reason, would that be in the yellow there? Probably.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
I'm just looking for reasons why people might not pick up, but it's a caller ID, whether they just missed the call. So, I mean, that could be a lot of it too. Now, do we text? We send out text as well?
Well, there has to be an opt-in for text. My understanding is that this is mainly phone call. I remembered a lot of this when we first put it in. I didn't, and I've not even had a chance to really digest this with the team. It was sent to me, and I was like, "Wow, this is really good information. I want to be able to share this." So it's a good question. I can look into it.
Thanks.
And Mrs. Kancianik.
No, I was gonna say about not answering. So you guys already covered it.
Okay.
But I would be interested to know for sure what it does show up as on caller ID, because I think that is important. Whether or not people answer or not.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but I don't remember that it was a problem. Like people did know it was and if committee members remember when we kind of laid this out, I did some phone calls and some videos, and I sent several, so like people knew it was coming. So that's not been and I've been able to talk to some parents especially, let's face it, when complaints are made like, hey, why am I getting this letter? Then I dig into that particular situation, and parents will say, oh yeah, okay, I remember I got a few phone calls, but I didn't realize blah, blah, blah. And so I never heard someone say, you never called me. So that doesn't mean that it's not happening. It just means that it's not risen to my level. So yeah, so I think I only have one more slide and then I can be done. I don't know where the time went, but I don't want to be the meeting extender. But reasons for absence, as you can see, illness or quarantine, which is language we don't use anymore, but it's still on the books. So illness is 69%. The other big one is 11% medical or dental appointments. So we know that there's a good connection between, good physical health and coming to school. So it's hard to fault that one. I will say that Lunch and Learn, the new program we have going on at the high school, I'm hoping that number goes down a little bit because students will be naturally incentivized to do it during that time period rather than missing classes, depending upon the student. So, and I'll leave it at that. Any other questions as it relates to this material?
That one makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, we're still on time. And all I think we have left now is if there's any public comment.
There is one comment.
Okay. You let him in.
Hi guys, it's me again, Mercedes Jackson, High Street, Pottstown, PA. So just two things I would like to bring up is just a suggestion for at the high schools or even middle schools, because up in the Pittsburgh School District, they unfortunately they are adding vape detectors in the 6th grade. Unfortunately, broke my heart when I heard that. So I was just wondering if that's maybe something that we can put on our to-do list with some of that funding, maybe for vape machines. It detects if they're vaping in the restrooms. And they said something like it let somebody know. So I don't know if it's like the security, I don't know, whoever has the monitor. So it goes off in there as well. So it's not like a smoke detector where it's making noise where the kids know it's going off. It's some type of signal to a person who's observing that. So I thought that was a great idea. We are losing, unfortunately, too many youth to these vapes. Also, at the back to school night at the middle school and the high school, I just wanted to let parents know that like I was at the backpack giveaway at the middle school, and there was a new lady who came to district. So sometimes we, people can be, they can feel shy or just scary to going to navigate new areas. So I just want to let them know that FAC will have a table. And if you are new to our district, please ask us and we will walk with you and support you. We are here to support you in this journey. And you do not have to do this alone. So again, September 7th, 5:30 to 7:30, bingo night, bring your daubers. I think it's going to be a good time with family and fellowship. And also, I just want to say that is a Saturday, and it's our first time doing a Saturday because we want to reach those parents who can't get out during the work week because you're too tired from after work, or you just have to get up so early the next day. So I'm hoping that we get a good turnout. So again, thank you so much, guys, for listening, and everybody have a blessed week.
Thank you. I'll have to put bingo on my calendar. And if that's it for public comment, then I think then we can adjourn the meeting with 1 minute to spare. Didn't make it quick, but didn't go over. So thanks everyone, and we'll see y'all next week.
Batten down the hatches for tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
See you.
Anthony, did you figure out what happened?
I kind of it just kept going in and out of like the plus, like if it's showing as charged. So I decided, you know what, I'll just come back here. So that way.
Are you telling me that your MacBook Pro died?
Yeah, like on a half battery. So it was been charging since 4. So I was like, okay, we're good. I had it still plugged in, guys are still getting juice. And
Where did you have it plugged in?
Next to my sofa. So I have an outlet there, and that's where I usually like do like the board meeting at.
Yeah, which is fine by me. But I'm still a little concerned, I guess would be the word. I'm a little concerned that your laptop died on you. Like that's not normal. Especially for a MacBook.